Thank you to Elio for the sponsorship. Has been a long summer. It flew by. It's a long summer, all at once. Not feeling well tonight, but and I'm like 0 for 20 on the COVID test. I'm still 0%. For the first time in forever, I took one. I was like, just give me one, doc.
Why? Because you're in the weather?
Yeah, I'm not feeling so well, but still.
We all were the past week or two.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Anyway, fine.
Don't say that to your wife when she's not feeling well. My wife is also not feeling well.
I do. I said to my wife, doctor. She can do
Yeah, right.
it.
Shocking.
Is there seltzer there?
Okay, so let's start. I wanted to start some Hilchos Mezuza. It seemed like it piqued some people's interest when we began discussing it last. Whatever, I mentioned it last year at some point. It was actually in a farm in a software store today. They told me they needed a Shayla's Tinuk on something. So, what?
What is that?
A Shayla's Tinuk. Sometimes when you're not sure, you bring a little kid.
So you went?
So I brought Esty down. Yeah, because they want any adult is gonna have negias based on they know what the word is. They know it's supposed to say vayadaber, but a little kid's not gonna know that. So at certain points you're supposed to your halacha is supposed to have by Sefer Torah also. In shul sometimes they may stop a kid. The way to do it is to call over a kid about 5, 6 years old and ask them what this letter is.
The thing is, he just started learning how to read.
Yeah, so they just know letters. They don't know.
Put two and two together.
Right, they're not using intuition when they're reading. They're just looking at the letter. Anyway, yeah, they had a Shiloh and a Vav or Yud, so they called Esty over, and she puzzled it. She said it was Yud.
Is the gold possible?
No, but he told me it's a classic story, I'm sure. But he told me that the one thing he had a very wealthy person once there who he was passing like a bunch of his stuff, bunch of his mezuzahs, and so he brought his kid down, and the kid agreed with the cipher, and he read it, whatever. He said, yeah, this is a samach when it's supposed to be a mem, and he said, this is when his father eventually got married. He was like, I sent you to school to teach you how to read. He's like, what are you doing? He is reading. He's reading what you're just don't want to see it.
Like another kid,
No, there's no second opinion on this. Once you ask that,
That's why I
okay.
never asked my kid because he doesn't know that well.
They test you first. Vav yod. Okay, what's this? Yeah. They show you a bunch of them. This one. Okay, what's this one? So the vav of Vaydaber. She said. Anyway, Hagar. So why did I go? So someone came into the store at that point, and he asked. I said, I'm from out in the sticks. I'm from Hikavil. Like, give me a mezuzah that's kosher. And they showed him. They said, they said the lowest we were going to give you was $120. The guy was like, "What?" He's like, "I just came here because Eichler's told me 110, and I thought they were crazy, so I came here." He's like,
I should start writing this.
This was Farstam. So they said, the usage now since it's saying 120 is the lowest.
yeah, they
lowest
sell them
estimate.
from people around.
I'm not that big
Lower,
here.
or something like that.
Yeah, you could technically.
He said now they only sell 120. They won't sell less than
You
120.
can get 80s. You can get 80s too.
Anyway, okay, but okay, so we know mezuzah is a mitzvah in the Torah, right? Mitzvah midiraisa, ksafim mezuzah b'secho. Say it twice a day. Rambam, interesting Rambam here. Read the words at the end of Hilchos Tefillin and Mezuzah. Here we go, Tefillin and Mezuzah. Chayav Adam Lizar b'Mezuzah. Person has to be very careful with mezuzah. It's constantly a chayav. I mean, it's when we have a house. Every time you're entering and leaving, you are pegeya. You bump into the yichud of Rebbeinu Shalom, and you remember the ava for the Rebbeinu Shalom. It wakes you up. Your Mishnos wakes you up from your sleep. What should that remind us all? Now we're in Elul. What else do we have during the year to wake us up from our sleep? Is our shayfer? But he says also the mezuzah. The mezuzah is a little bit of a shayfer. Every day when you walk outside, it should wake you up. From your sleep. You're being like distracted with stupidity. There's nothing that's really eternal except for knowing the Rebbeinu Shalom. That should calm you down. That should bring you back to earth. Space back in. It should keep you on the straight and now. On Omru Chachamim, the Chachamim say, Kol mi sheyesh lo tefillin b'roshai u'b'zrayah. If you have tefillin on your head and on your arm, tzitzis b'bigdai u'mezuza b'pichsai muchsach lo shlachechta. It's muchsach shlachechta that you want to be chayta. The idea is he's looking at the Rambam is looking at this very practically. There's no lofty stuff going on there. It's just yesh lo maskirim rabim. You have these things that are constant reminders. You're wearing tefillin, mezuzah. You have these things and you're constantly being reminded of them. It says very interesting here. Hamalachim shemetzilun somilachta shenemar. These are the malachim that are matzil you from being chayta. This is a very Rambam dekavar. Malachim, and the Rambam is saying, is not necessarily these angelic, mystical creatures. No, malachim could be mitzvahs that are surrounding you at all times. Malachim could be your tefillin, it could be your mezuzah. These are the malachim, these are the shluchim from the Rebbeinu Shalom that have this koyach that can be matzah you for being chayta. Shenemar chayne malach Hashem saviv le'yov v'echaltzev. Hashem makes an encampment of his malach, of his malachim around those who are Yirei of, who are Yarei Shemayim, and they will offer protection for him. He's learning these malachim are these mitzvahs that we're able to surround ourselves with, and one constant mitzvah you can surround yourself with, and we'll see soon from a Magen Avraham how he viewed the svivas of the mitzvahs mezuzah that can be matzah you from being chayta. So that's a little just Akdama background. And we'll get into a lot of the halachic things that come up. So let's start over here with Shulchan Aruch. There's not so much, even though technically this is a Minchas Chinuch share, the mitzvahs that are popular in halacha, that have a lot of halacha written about them, Minchas Chinuch generally stayed away from. That was not his mission. His mission was to deal with the mitzvahs that are less properly dealt with. So when it comes to Mezuza, he basically says, look in the Paiskim, and they're gonna guide you here. But so the Shulchan Aruch says, mitzvah says Lichtov, Parsha Shema v'Hayim Shemoya. You have to write 2 parshas in your Mezuzah, Shema v'Hayim Shemoya, as opposed to 4 in Tefillin. You're going to have 2 in your into a Mezuzah. V'Kvaya Mezuzah is Pesach.
You mentioned mitzvah lichtoi. Is the mitzvah to write it or to?
Well, then he says to be Kaveh Mezuzah, saying, is there a mitzvah to actually write it? Is that like a separate? We have a mitzvah to say for Torah, but is this like a separate?
No, but in itself it is because.
It says Uksavtum Mezuzah.
Yeah. So, but the difference is also any part that you're writing. For any one of those things, that in itself is mitzvahs. As if the mitzvahs you're writing Sefer Torah, it's the same idea.
But what they always point out is more. It's mashal. It's part of the chelik of the mitzvahs mezuzah.
Are you saying mitzvahs kula?
No, he's saying it's mashal. It's part of the mitzvah, a chelik of the mitzvahs mezuzah, not a chelik of the separate from the mitzvahs.
You're only making a mitzvah if you write and then you put it on the doorway.
Maybe, but he's saying, but I'm saying, one would have thought without this lashon, even though the lashon of Torah is uksaftam, that the mitzvah mezuzah is putting on your wall. You write something. There could be any mitzvah to write. Here it's mashma that part of the chelik of your mitzvah mezuzah is to write it and put it on the wall. Now we have someone else writing. Okay. V'tzarich lizar b'moed. That's lashon around. You have to be very careful. V'chol zarba yirichu yamav imev banav. Anyone who is in this, you'll have Uzaychet Richus Yamim and Yamim of your children. Where do you get that from? Where does that come from? That concept that you get a Richus Yamim for Mezuzah. Man Yer B'Mechem, twice a day. Man Yer B'Mechem. Same thing. Ksat Mezuzah B'Sech B'Jechel. Man Yer B'Mechem V'Nechem. Right. The Torah has a little bit of a more maybe what we might call a litvish. So he says if you don't do it, you're going to have Ketziras Yomim, and they say it's Mechlal Heinat Tishmei Alav. But here the Mechaber reads it this way: then he brings the Torah's lashon. If you're not Zor, you will have shortened days. Okay. Now, the Ramah brings halacha. What happens if you only have a choice between tefillin and mezuzah? We won't get into that. We'll get into right now. Very interesting. Here's an interesting shiloh. I'll tell you my shiloh this summer. Baruch Hashem, my wife's family, we have a summer home. My father-in-law is very invested in, and we've been fixing up the basement. And like any good construction project. What? No, not from Muncie. Nor that excited. So, like any good construction project, it was not done on time. It was not done before the summer. So we're basically squeezing. We're squeezing upstairs, and working it out. It was fine. It was working. Anyway, one Friday afternoon at 2:00, when my brother-in-laws realized that, hey, one of the rooms are ready to go downstairs. He's going to move down to that room for Shabbos, and that'll at least lighten up the load on everyone, and it'll be geschmack. Great idea, right? One problem: there's no mezuzah on there. So tell me you can't move in there for Shabbos. There's no mezuzah. It's like, come on, yeah, but there's no mezuzah on that. You can't move in for Shabbos just because you don't have a mezuzah. You're going to put it up right after Shabbos. He didn't believe me. But Lamaisa, it's a Mefurisha, I had to convince him by calling over to Sokol, and he told him that I was correct, but that's how it works. It's all right. So the Pischei Tshuva brings like this. Shaila as follows. Let's say a guy realizes on Shabbos and Yom, this is more of it. That case is really pushing on. So it was Friday afternoon. There was no Shaila. You can move in there on Shabbos with not being mezuzah. But let's say on Shabbos, you realize, oh shoot, there's no mezuzah on this room, or the mezuzah falls down on Shabbos and Yom. What are you supposed to do? With that room, you don't have the mezuzah on it. You can't put it up.
Is there a theme on every single room, or on like let's say one per house?
You can't do anything about it. I would say, firstly,
let's go with one question at a time. That is a very big question of mezuzah. Unfortunately, for most people, they don't realize that the answer for it is very pasha. That there is a chiyuv in every single room. Absolutely. There is, right, Beisecha means every room in your house. There's rayas from the sugya, even though, it can sound like it in certain minyanim when the Rambam's talking about shiur or going in and out of your house. It can sound like it's only on the house. The Ramah, we'll get to it. The Ramah later says in his days that there's this toys that's going around that people think it's like just the front door, and like everything else is just like a hither or something like that. Right. So he tries to defend it, why they would think that, or whatever. Right. It's incorrect. No, the special that on every room of your house you are chiyuv to have a mezuzah. So each room is going to be done individually. So you want to know? Okay, we're going to get to your svar. We'll get to your svar. That's a big word. Yeah. What's that?
Answer. First of all, if it falls down on Shabbos, you should be able to pick it up because it's designed for the cloth and whatever.
No, you can't put it back on the door.
You can't put it back on the door, but you can put it on the side. But
fine, but that's not the question. The question was, can you? Yes. You can't put it back up. So what do you do now? Do you have to leave the room?
No.
Well, why don't you have to leave the room?
No. Because you have a house, right? The door to the front of your house is your front door.
That's exactly what I was asking. Every room is mechuyev mitzvah. You're mevatel. If you don't leave one mitzvah, you're mevatel mitzvah has to be there right. So you're shaking. No, it's put in first shulchan aruch every pasuk. It says this. You're mevatel mitzvah has to be deraisa. 100%.
If it falls up on Shabbos, you do not have to.
Maybe that's a different story, but that has nothing to do with the fact that there is a mitzvah in every room.
You're saying it's something else, but I'm saying if it falls up on Shabbos.
Why? Because you don't have to do it. So let me ask you a different question. Okay, let's say it falls off the front. Let's say all your mezuzahs fall out. There's a little bit of a tremor. All your mezuzahs fall on Shabbos. Ask that. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
What do you do?
What's the svara? Fine. All right, let's listen. So there, you took them down. You didn't. You had to go check them. So you leave them off for a little bit. But now you're stuck. It fell off. You know.
One is Shabbos.
You can see going there for a little bit.
No, but there's not. That's not the. That's because there's a din to check your mezuzahs, so you have to take them off to check them. Here, you don't have a mezuzah. You have to put it on. If you just wait, if the mezuzah falls off, and you're like, oh, wait a little bit, I'm busy now, wait a little bit. You move out the mitzvah, you have to put it on.
But you're not waiting. You would, it's Shabbos. You can't do it.
So here you're saying you have no choice what you do otherwise. So it may be a difference when it comes to checking the mezuzah. There, the mitzvah itself demands you not to do it. Over here, the mitzvah's mezuzah doesn't demand you not to put it up. Shabbos demands that you can't put it back up. So the halacha, what the Pischei Tshuva passes is as follows. He says, if you have another place to go, you have to leave and go to that other place. You cannot stay in that place if you have another place to go. If you don't have another place to go, he says you could stay there in the place. What's the heter? What's the difference in this? This heter is based on a very famous and a very important mordechai that comes up a lot in halacha. Mordechai says as follows. What if a person on Shabbos is walking out of the street and he realizes his tzitzis got ripped off the baguette? What does he do? He's out in the street on Shabbos. What does he do? He has two. Number one, he has an issue of carrying on Shabbos, which is a potential problem depending on what type of rishus he's in. And number two, he has a problem that he's wearing a baggage shadal kanfus. That's a bittul mitzvah midiraisa. So the Mordechai says, as a matter of fact, he says the halacha is that when you're in a karmelis, if the carrying is only derabanan, you don't have to take off the baggage. It says because it's what we call covered abrius, that to take off your baggage in military would be covered abrius, and it's doiche the isra midirabanan of carrying in the karmelis. The kasha is what about the mitzvah sesame midiraisa? When you wear a baggage shaldal kanfus and don't put on tzitzis, That's a bittul mitzvah sesame deraisa. So how you like to do that and not take off the baggage? So the Mordechai says a svara like this. That maybe this is what you meant to say before. I'm not sure, but this is what the Mordechai svara is. That it says that when the mitzvahs asay, that there's something called an oines patring you from mitzvah deraisa, meaning that there is no bittul mitzvah asay when you can't do it right now. Even though you could take off the beged, that's not what the Torah is b'chayiv you, because the Torah didn't tell you. He says, if the Torah told you it's usher to wear a beged with shaldal kanfas, so then it would be usher. I can't do it. There's no head to wear it. Take off the beged. What are you doing? Right? But the Torah didn't say it's usher beged. The Torah said when you have a beged shaldal kanfas, put on tzitzis. I can't put on tzitzis right now. I'm not able to put on tzitzis right now. So when you're not able to put on tzitzis right now, there is no mitzvah tzitzis.
So you're saying a positive commandment versus a negative commandment.
Yes, or Shabbos on Shabbos, and which is wrong.
Well,
So-
no, he's not saying positive. He's
No,
saying
it is, because shackles you have to take it off right away. It doesn't matter where you are, you have to take it off.
well, not in this case. What do you mean?
No, Shabbos, the mitzvah of Shabbos is you have to take it off no matter what.
Not if there's covered over. Yes, it depends what it is. Covered over.
You
It
say
depends on
you say guys walking the street, you can't take it. I'm saying
that. It's a Gemara that says that you can't do that. We're making a lot of assumptions tonight. So let's try not to make something else. Yes, the Gemara says that if you're in a shuk, you do not have to take off your shuk. There's different levels to it with how big a covered over it is, how big not. But yes, that is a before Gemara. You do not take off shotguns in the street and just run in your birthday suit through the streets. You don't do that even if you're wearing shotguns. Right?
Just wear power on your head, I'm not worried.
Yeah. Hey, but this is the Mordechai Svar when it comes to this. It's not exactly law. The point is, you definitely cannot be mivat to the law of tying the tzitzis. That you definitely cannot do. All right, that you for sure have to take off the beged for. But because you can't put on the beged, memelo there is no mitzvah tzitzis, and you become potter from it. That is the opinion of Mordechai. Based on this Mordechai, that is what the Pesach Tshuva is bringing. It's actually Prima Godim. That the Prima Godim is saying like this. He says, if you have no bias, you have no other choice. Why don't you have to have no bias? Is a good question. We'll get to that in a second. If you have no other bias, you do not have to leave the bias. If you have no other choice, you don't have to leave the bias when the mezuzah falls off. Because of this Mordechai. Otherwise, you would have to do it. How can you stay in the bias? You move out the mitzvah say by staying in the bias.
Even though it's not their house.
Huh?
Meaning in this story, it's not their house. Meaning, why would it technically be different than?
Yeah, but by making it a dira now.
Airbnb, let's say, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to put up a mezuzah, do you?
No, but here my father-in-law's living in the house just because it's his kid in the room. The kid staying there doesn't matter. It's his base dira.
And Airbnb.
No, my father-in-law's definitely mechuyev to put on. You're mechuyev to put on your kid's board.
No, but Airbnb, you don't have to put on it. Why not?
And here because you don't know it's niskar. There's a rental. There's a rental.
So why is
If you rent it, if you want to know, unless maybe it's what you're
his
asking,
son, it's
rent
not his
it.
house. So
No,
why
but
did he
he's
move
the
in?
owner of the house. He's living there. He's there, my
Who
father.
is it? No, but who's downstairs?
But it doesn't matter. I'm saying that's like your kid being in his room. You have to put up the mezuzah, right? What's different? So maybe you could have a chab. I was saying this. Maybe have him rent the room from him, and then.
But a kid. Why is a kid? It's a gifting
What?
him.
But then no, then my brother would have a chiyuv. No, but the way it would work would maybe have one of us rent it.
Not to get off on.
But also only be D'Rabbanan,
Let's
maybe.
say someone would
Easier.
say. Let's say someone would tell me I have an apartment you could use, and they're from person.
Yeah.
As a gift, like you go use, and I go and I see there's no mezuzahs. I don't have to put on mezuzah, or do I? I'm trying to understand the difference. If it's not his house,
No,
It's
it's his.
it's not-
But you may be causing him out of the you may cause him to without the mitzvah say, but it's staying there.
What? How are you causing him? It's his mitzvah to put mitzvahs on it.
But he now,
You mean
but
occupancy?
what? By so the question is, are you doing anything? That's a good question that we're going to get to in a second. What is how important is the living to the mitzvah's mezuzah, which is not so clear. But let's assume for a second. Let's say he held no one's living there in this house, so he's potter, which maybe is a good stuff, maybe is not.
or he didn't get around to putting it up, or whatever, or yeah.
Well,
now-
so that might depend. If he didn't get around to putting it up, and he just
He
and
said, "I
he
could
so
use
that,
his
and
apartment."
so and he's just being mevatel as mitzvah say, not getting around is not a good excuse. But if you're
Right.
mechlud, you're mechlud, right?
Right.
But let's say he did not get around to doing it, and you're just living there, so you're just living there, so it has nothing to do with you really.
And
It's his problem. You may not want to stay in
why
a
is
place
that
that doesn't
not
have
the
the
case
shmir. What?
Why is it not the case here? It's
No,
your
but-
father-in-law's problem.
No,
It's
no.
not
So
his.
here, so because here, so let me ask something. In this whole, there's another question. In the Prima Godim Malay, what's Prima Godim saying? Saying if the mezuzah falls down and you have another bias, you have to leave. What's the point of leaving? What does it do for you? It's still a bias.
Right.
That's essentially what you just asked. What's the difference in this
I'm
case?
asking that it's not the person who is going in the room is not his chiyuv. It's the owner of the house's chiyuv.
Right, but it could be that the person going, but here in this situation, the person staying in the room is what's creating the chiyuv on the balabais. Meaning that's the subject I have to get to is that every we'll get to there. Right? When you make something into dira, now there's a certain moment where you say this is now a livable place. Then you create the chiyuv to put it in. We'll get to it in a second.
Is there a concept also that it has to be lived in for sure? Meaning like the sukkah, you don't have to put a mezuzah on because it's not a kebab, it's alright.
Okay, that's not so. Yeah.
What do you have to put on mezuzah on?
What you have to mezuzah? No, you don't have to mezuzah in the sukkah. But yeah. But what do you want to say? So what here?
So does it work that like with my Freya, let's say for example,
I moved in for Shabbos and then left.
Yeah. So it's not a.
What's your kivik? Listen, the truth is really once the house is done, you should really put up mezuzahs. Once the house is ready to go, we don't do this. If you buy a house and your house is totally ready to go, people don't put it until they move in. So it's not so partial. We'll get to it probably on we'll have a different share about this, but it's not so partial. The minhag ha'olam is to wait till you move in, because that's it's not considered a base deer until you actually move in. But once you do move in, then you moved in. You can't say like, oh, I just moved in for Shabbos, and now I'm out. I don't think so. That would be a stretch for me. Okay, but anyway, let's get. This is the Mordechai that the Pri Megadim is telling. So when he's saying, therefore, you could live there if you have another option. If you don't have another option, though, he still says you should leave. Why? Because if you look in the Mordechai, it's mefurish that even though it's true that when you can't do something, you're not mechuyev the mitzvah, but he says in Issur D'Rabbanan there still is there. In Issur D'Rabbanan you shouldn't do it, and therefore he has to say only out to cover the brias, you don't take off the tzitzis, whatever. So the Pri Megadim shows it to here and says therefore only if you have no other option should you rely on this Mordechai. But if you have another option, D'Rabbanan, you should not be staying there. If you have another option, the lumdis is gold. The lumdis is true. You can't put up a mezuzah, so this thing doesn't need mezuzah right now. It has no mitzvahs mezuzah. But D'Rabbanan, you should not be staying there if you have another option. This happened with someone in the shul. He made a mistake. Whatever. He thought as a seicher, he built a room in his apartment, basically, and he thought that as a renter he had 30 days to put up a mezuzah.
That's what I was trying
Right,
to say.
which is incorrect here. It does not apply in this case. So renter only has 30 days to put up a mezuzah when you first move into the apartment because you may back out of the lease. When you've been in the apartment already for 2 years and you build a room, what?
It doesn't have like new addition.
Right, a new addition does not account for. So he really did need to put up a mezuzah. We only realized this on Shabbos, and his baby was sleeping there. I think we only right. If whoever the baby was sleeping before, it should be moved out.
So
Yeah.
the question
Yeah.
you said before that I should my head at. There's two reasons why I would say it. One is firstly you can't put up a mitzvah on Shabbos. That's
Right.
going to be understandable. The second reason is when you have children that you cannot move because there's no air, you can't carry them.
Right.
So you're not going to take your kid. And you keep on saying you. I said yes, me. I'm not going to take my kid out of the house. I'm not carrying him down the block.
Okay. Right.
There's no air for him.
Right.
So
if you have no other, so you'd be stuck. So you'd be able to stay. Right.
So that was my bigger. That's when I said no, that you don't have to because when you're talking about the situation, people can walk, but they can go somewhere else. That's understood.
Right. Okay. So that's what. So that's your So you are okay. Fine.
And I need an arm for that other Gemara when you're done.
Yeah. It's Gemara Brachos in the third paragraph. Anyway, okay. Now on this, just a couple points on this Mordechai. There's a bunch of things. My shver Gado is on the shiur of sugar fush for my shver. He had a kasha like this. Why isn't the Mordechai is a chiddush, right? The Mordechai say you can keep the tzitzis on, and there are Rishonim Mordechai like on Mordechai, and say no, you have to take the tzitzis off. You're mechuyev in tzitzis. How could you wear this baggage? Shaldal kanfas, right? So I have a kasha. Why aren't we, all of us? I mean, I think all of us in here, although maybe not. We'll see in a second. Why aren't all of us walking rayas to this Mordechai? What does he mean? We're all walking around with a baggage shaldal kanfas without tchelas on it, right? It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah on the Torah to put on tchelas. How are you allowed to put on, when you put on a baggage shel dal kanfas, you're now mechuyev in tchelas. So what are you saying? I don't have tchelas. There's no tchelas anymore. We don't know what it is. Okay, so don't put on the baggage shel dal kanfas. Who allowed you to put on the baggage shel dal kanfas? The only teretz says the only teretz says the Mordechai is since we believe you don't have tchelas, therefore we have no choice, and you're part of the mitzvah. And you're not, and therefore you're not. There's no problem with putting on a bel shadal kanfas, only because we believe that. And we'd always tell people who would start asking, "What do they hold about tchelis?" Just say, "Listen, be careful, because if you really do believe there's tchelis, then you have to take off your beged shadal kanfas right now, and you cannot ever wear it again if you don't have tchelis, which is a true point. But anyway, but getting back to when he wanted to know why isn't this a raya brura to the Mordechai, the fact that we wear a baggage shel kavos without tchelis. Again, what's the chiddush of the Mordechai? The chiddush of the Mordechai is that when you have a mitzvah, you could get out of this mitzvah. You don't have to put yourself in a situation with this mitzvah. Don't wear a baggage with four corners. You're not mechuyev in tzitzis. Says the Mordechai, you're still allowed to wear that beged when you can't put on tzitzis because you're not mechuyev in the mitzvah when you can't do it. So even though the logic might be just avoid it completely, just avoid the situation, says the Mordechai, if you cannot do it, like on Shabbos when you can't tie the tzitzis, put on the beged shel al kafos, you don't have to put on the tzitzis. So that l'chayr is what we're relying on every time we wear a beged shel al kafos without tchelis. That's his kasha. I think there's a passionate answer to this kasha. The Rambam explains, and I don't think any Rishonim are chaylik on this Rambam. The Rambam explains in Sefer Mitzvahs and in Yad HaChazaka, he says, tchelis and tzitzis are one mitzvah. There's one mitzvah in the Torah to wear tzitzis, and it has two parts to it. The Rambam says there are many mitzvahs that have different chalakim to it. And he says, and it's one of his klolim in Sefer Mitzvahs, he says, we don't count those branches of the mitzvah as separate mitzvahs. They're all under one umbrella. It says the chiddush by tzitzis and tchelas, that they're under one umbrella, is that they're two unique things. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says they're not ma'akev each other. You do tzitzis without tchelas, which is what we do. You can also do tchelas without tzitzis. If for whatever reason you don't have tzitzis, you can just do the tchelas. However, whatever, be creative and come up with your scenario. You can just do the tchelas and not be mekayim and not be mekayim.
Color, not a...
I understand. Okay. Let's say you only have one, so you can do the tchelas and not be, they're not ma'akev each other, tzitzis and tchelas. So says the Rambam, that's a tremendous chiddush. You have one mitzvah with two different halakim that are independently kiyumim of it, and are not ma'akev each other, but they are still only one mitzvah. But that's a fact, the Rambam says. There are only one mitzvah. There are no two separate mitzvahs, tzitzis and tchelas. So if that's the case, then it's not a good right. Yeah, we're putting on tzitzis because we are choosing. We have this baggage shel al kafos. We can put it on and be mekayim the mitzvah say of tzitzis in 50%, and that's a good kiyuma mitzvah. That's a legitimate kiyuma mitzvah. Sometimes 50% of a mitzvah is illegitimate. Very often 50 there's nothing, right? There's no prizes for getting close. You either do the mitzvah or you don't. Here, the chiddush by tzitzis and tchelis is 50% is a kiyum. So we do it. So of course you put it on. Then you're not mevatel the mitzvah of tzitzis when you. It's not like it doesn't make sense to look at it and say you're mekayim 50% of the mitzvah of tzitzis, but you're also being mevatel the mitzvah of tzitzis by not wearing tchelis. That doesn't make sense. Then we wouldn't say that they're not ma'akev each other if you're being mevatel the mitzvah say of tchelis by not putting it on. Eloi, it's clear that you have a mitzvah here where there's 100% of tzitzis with tchelis and 50% of tzitzis without tchelis, and that's a good kibbutz mitzvah. That's legitimate, and that's how we do it. So it's not a raya. The Mordechai is talking about where you're not going to put any tzitzis on the beged. You're going to wear a beged shel al kafos with nothing on it. There, you're really being mevatel the mitzvah saseh. And says the Mordechai, since you can't do it, that's not considered a bittul mitzvah saseh. That's one thing I wanted to point out. Another thing, this is more nagei lemaisa, that this Mordechai is used commonly by those who want to be matir. Let's say, you ever had the shiur of an electronic thing that you have to know if you want to be tired or not. All right, so the shiur is, let's say it's going to break. A big part of the pushback against it is that it's not really right. There's different svaras. There's different svaras why will be matir. One of the main svaras why to be matir it is because it's going to break. Right, so they want to basically say, okay, so since it's going to break, you can't be mekayim your mitzvahs tefillas kelim. Now, how does that get you out of? How does that allow you to use the kli? The kli still needs tefillah. The Teretz says they say this Mordechai. You see that when something can't be done, that gets you out of the mitzvah. That says not the same way you can't put on the tzitzis, it can't be done. So you're now out of mitzvah. You're part of mitzvah tzitzis. So when tefillas kelim can't be done, right? Who said tefillas kelim? So just because it can't be done, you're able to use the kli. It gets you out of tefillas kelim, and now you don't have to. What?
You don't have to use the kli though.
Well, you don't have to put on the baggage shel al kafos. That's all. That's the chiddush the Mordechai says.
You go first.
What?
I'm saying with the mezuzah, with the Mukar, you're not going to.
Mukar the Mordechai tzitzis.
That's tzitzis. You're not going to. Right. Okay.
Don't wear the tzitzis. You say you're allowed to put on the no. Mordechai says you put them on. Okay.
That whole thing with kli that you can't tell because to make it room is incorrect. Any appliance or any small appliance that you need a table, you just wait.
You just wait a long time. That's what I said. I said the real pushback against it is the fact that you could tell them.
Over a whole weekend, then using our
because it wasn't.
Which
dried
one?
out.
What was
It
it?
wasn't dried out. Waited because water got trapped inside. If you let it wait, it won't come. You put it on the side. What do you put?
So
Huh?
you let it dry out.
No, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on from that. That is maybe we'll do Tfilas Kalim next. But Tfilas Kalim is another Geshmak. So good. This Mordechai is one of the Makaris for to possibly be matter. Okay, but getting back to this, I said, okay, that is the Piskei Tshuva, very very Geshmak, very important halacha. He says if you have another bias, you should not live there if the mezuzah falls off. If you don't, then you should. I'm not sure. I wasn't masupik even in this case. First of all, we had options. Obviously, we had done it the first 6 weeks of the summer. We had survived. So I don't know why the 7th week suddenly we had to use that basement room. So I done that as yesh lo bias acher, which I think was pashut. But also, I'm just not sure. Here it was Friday afternoon. Let's say you had no other bias. So it's Friday afternoon at 2:00, right? So what's considered? So they extend the Pri Megadim. I think the Pri Megadim himself or others extend the Pri Megadim and say who did if there's no mezuzahs in the city to buy. That's considered. Meaning, let's say it's not Shabbos. It's a weekday, Tuesday. There's no mezuzahs in the city to buy. Do you have to leave your house? You don't have to leave your house until you can get a mezuzah. That's what they say. You're in Muncie, 2:00. You could probably find the answer. You could probably find the mezuzah somewhere. Elamai, you'd already ordered them from Lakewood, and you're going to go to, I don't know, you can go to Tovia's or whatever, and find a gemach. You can find a thing. Elamai, what are you going to do? No, I'm not going to move into the room now. I'll wait till Friday night, 10:00 at night, and then I'll move into the room. And now you can't get the mezuzah. That to me, I don't think that sounds right. That should be permissible. Okay, but I want to get to another point here, which is part of what Alicia was bringing up before. Is what's the point of this? What's the point of this whole people going to leave the room? You're still mechuyev, right? If I leave my house for Shabbos, if I go to Shabbos, Pashtus, I'm not pater from mezuzah. I'm still mechuyev in mezuzah. I own a house, so it doesn't matter to leave the house. Why is it helping? You're not helping anything. So what's the point? Why is it just punishing you by making you leave the house? It's not doing anything. I mean, he holds he's doing something by making you leave the house. There is a very famous Rebbe Kveger. Kveger is a Pella. I don't really understand how Rebbe Kveger could approach it this way. But Rebbe Kveger holds, he has a shaila. He believes, he says he's Mesupik Ladina. He believes every time a guy goes out to buy something, you go to Glotmar, you come back home, you should make another bracha or mezuzah.
What bracha?
Bracha al mitzvahs mezuzah, not l'kvay mezuzah, but al mitzvahs mezuzah. He says. So he says why? He says what's the difference than every time you leave your sukkah, you go out for an hour, you come back and you make a bracha leish in the sukkah. Why is it so far? Why is it so crazy to say such a thing? You're coming back home, you're kaim mitzvahs mezuzah, make a bracha, right? Mitzvahs mezuzah every time you come back home. He doesn't really understand why. Elmai, he says you're going to tell me no when you're not in your house. That's not considered. You're still mechuyev in mezuzah. Just because you're out doesn't make you not mechuyev in mezuzah. So he says no. He has a raya that when you leave the house, you're not mechuyev in mezuzah from a Magen Avram. Well, the Magen Avram is a very interesting discussion. He's discussing the halacha whether or not there's an Indian of wearing tzitzis at night. Let's just say, is there any? If we hold your pater at night, is there still an Indian to put on tzitzis? So he brings from the Zayar that the Zayar says there is an Indian. And the Zayar says, it brings a raya from David HaMelech. The Gemara says David HaMelech suddenly was in Beis HaMerchatz, and he chat the pachad, he's in the Beis HaMerchatz, says, no, he doesn't have any mitzvahs, he's orum in the mitzvahs, he's naked, right? He says, later the Lashon is he says that Chaviv in Yisrael shesivum and Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'mitzvahs. Hakadosh Baruch Hu surrounded the mitzvahs and realized he's not. He has no mitzvahs. So fact the Zohar. Why isn't every night? Why isn't it about every night that he has no mitzvahs? What's different in the Beis HaMerchatz? First says every night he wore tzitzis at all times. So he always had a mitzvah on him at all times. It's only when he was in the Beis HaMerchatz, only when he didn't have a tzitzis on him anymore.
He has a mitzvah already.
What?
He said he has a bris milah, he has a mitzvah.
That's a shot. Whatever bris milah, maybe David was no mole, and maybe mole is not a whatever. This. It was a Makayim bris with that. There's talk about that. But I think the Gemara. The Gemara says that he was comforted by the bris. But then the Osha is no mole. There's talk about it. But anyway, so fact the Zohar. Why every night wasn't he worried? If I says he wore tzitzis at night, Dr. Magen Avram, it's not a raya. It's not a raya. Why? Because that night he had mezuzahs. He was sleeping in his room. He had a mezuzah on the door, so that's why he was sitting with mitzvahs. He had the mezuzah. When he's in the Beis HaMerchatz, so as Magen Avram, he didn't have the mezuzah. In fact, what are you talking about? He had his mezuzah at home. He's still mechuyev in mezuzah. Just because he's in a base of America, he still had his mitzvah. What does that have to do with anything? So Dr. King advice says from the Magen Avraham, when you leave your home, you're not mechuyev. You're not mechuyev in mezuzah, and you hold this way l'maiser. He says that he ends off. He says, "Als the bracha he found." He says, "Achazman, I found the Sefer Birkei Yosef," and he says that the bracha to what Yitzchak was saying before, the bracha is the Torah mezuzah. The bracha is when you put it up, and therefore that's why even when someone buys a home that the mezuzah is already put up, you don't make a bracha because the bracha is only on the ma'isa kvias of mezuzah. And just know, by the way, if mezuzah falls off, you make a bracha when you put it back up. Yes, you make a bracha when
I
you
have
put
a
it up.
question. I never made the bracha, even when I put
That's a lot of brachas.
Okay.
So when I check the mezuzahs, I should make a bracha putting it up?
You never put it. That's a good try.
I never knew there was a bracha until someone
Right.
It's funny because I was told the
difference?
opposite. I was told the opposite. Says when we put it up, you do, but if it falls down, you put it back up. You don't have to.
That's a mistake.
Why wouldn't
Mistakes.
he have to make a bracha?
It might be it's gone or so. Whenever you're not missing das them,
You're taking them down and.
so whenever you take them, when you take them down, you don't put them. When you take them down, you don't make a bracha to put them
So
back
why
up.
shouldn't you? Why shouldn't
So you never do. What's that? A normal person doesn't. You don't put them. You don't make a bracha to put them back up from the
After
cipher.
from checking.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So you're saying if I had to make this off because I had to bring in a refrigerator that was literally.
If you took it off me das and you weren't missing das from it, then you do not make a
I
bracha.
had to pull it back in, but I knew I was going to put it back up.
Then you don't make a bracha. Same thing by towels. Same
Whatever
along by
you-
towels.
Right.
You take your towels off and you don't put it.
That's
You don't make a
every
bracha.
time.
That's
Even if it falls off,
You
know
put.
put it
That's
back on.
incorrect. By towels, when it falls off, you put it back on. You make a bracha.
No, I'm saying for the mezuzah.
From this is also when it falls off and you didn't know, you didn't realize it's falling off, then you do make a bracha. You didn't know. But when you knew, when you midas, you took it off. So but okay, getting back to this, Kveger says that vice is well to make a bracha l'kvoya mezuzah, and therefore that's why you don't make a bracha. But otherwise, he holds meikar din when you leave your home, pater mezuzah, come back home, you're mechuyev mezuzah, which is a tremendous chiddush. Obviously, that would explain this prima gada. What's the point? I asked, well, what's the point of leaving the house? This would explain the because leaving the house you become part of mezuzah. Lamaisa, is I don't think is the pashtus as the accepted opinion. The pashtus says you're mechuyev mezuzah no matter where you are. I the Magen Avraham. Remember, Kveger brought a raya from the Magen Avraham. Kveger said, why does the Magen Avraham say David only had mezuzah when he was at night in his house? Why didn't he have mezuzah when he's in the base of Merachlets? They say no. The point by David is that he was. There's a concept of being the suva of mitzvahs, being surrounded by them. Even though he's mechuyev in mezuzah, he's mekayim mitzvah over there. Your bank account could be dishing out tzedakah every second. You're not surrounded by mitzvahs. There was a certain closeness that he wanted to have to feel the mitzvahs around him that David Melech didn't feel from mezuzah in the base of Merachlets. But Avada, he's mechuyev in mezuzah. It doesn't mean that he's pater from mezuzah, and you become mechuyev again when you get home. So getting back to how else would you understand the Pri Megadim? Let's just land for a second. If you lose Rebbe Kveger and you don't want to go like Rebbe Kveger and say that every time you leave your house you become pater mezuzah, so what's trying the Pri Megadim? What are you doing when you leave the house? So this is what I was bringing around this to before. Is that I think what you're doing is because you're leaving Bedafka to get out of mezuzah, you're being mevatla from a shem dira, and you're saying I don't live here now. Like this is not a base dira right now for me. I'm out, and especially if you never live there in the room by not going in. I think you're doing that. And even if you leave it, Vice says Pri Megadim holds you can like say, I'm closing this up. This is not a base dira, and you close it up for Shabbos. You're right. Every time you go to the store, it's not ice dira because left, but because you left because you didn't have mezuzahs on there, that you can do. It's chiddush the Pri Megadim, but that you can do by leaving it leheja, announcing like to the world, this is not my dira right now because it has no mezuzah. You can be mevatel that shame from. I was just saying, even if it's my father-in-law's room, once you start using it, that's now announcing that it's a usable room as part of the house. And it's his, he owns it. He's mechuyev mezuzah now. But if you don't move into the room yet, you've never announced it as a base dira. And like I said, that's what we all rely on when Mitzvah one day you should all she's already there, but you should buy a new house bigger, even closer to the shul, or the shul moves closer to you, right? But it will get you some new mezuzahs for your new house, and but the point is, at that point in time, the way I know, it's that till you move in, we don't consider it to be your base dira. So it's the same thing. This Pri Megadim till you can leave the room and like be mavato. It's shame here. One other interesting thing that just to finish off this sif here is that the Ramah brings yes right. Your kids maybe drive you crazy about this kissing the mezuzah. Your kids drive you crazy. You didn't kiss the mezuzah, Tati. Some say when you leave the house, you should put your hand on the mezuzah. You should say Hashem Yishmer Tzeitzeh. Hashem should be shomer my leaving. And similarly, when you come in, you should also put your hand on the mezuzah. No mention of kissing here, but it's a start. Huh? Okay, and those are probably good psukim too. The Birkei Yosef I think brings out from the Arizal. He says, you should put your finger on the word shakai, that's on the outside of the zug, and then you kiss it. So here's where the kissing comes from the Ari. And you should mispalel Hashem that He should be shomer, and that He should be shomer me when I'm leaving. But just to point out one thing, so it does come through, but that it's really it's a din in leaving your house and coming back in your house. It's a din in shmira that this idea from the Rambam also that like when you're leaving, you have a certain shmira that Hashem comes with you and guards you as you go out. So it's kind of talking that this whole Indian from the Ari is probably only when you're actually leaving the front door or coming in the front door 10 times. Every time you come in a door.
Or the multiple times.
But,
my sisters used to do that before they went to sleep. Where does that come from?
I have no idea where that comes from.
You never.
That's just OCD.
That's OCD?
That's OCD.
I guess so.
No, but you heard it too.
Yeah, multiple times before.
Wait, I heard it also. I don't know if it's
I just finished on one thing. That's a question, but yeah, it just makes it a lot easier, a lot more less to that. When you leave the house and you come inside, and it's a good thing to tell your kids also when they try to. Yeah, tell me shut up. It's only when you leave. Look in the Shulchan Aruch. That drives me crazy.
Do you have to, if you're checking your mezuzahs, right? Do you have to bring them in to check it, or can you do it yourself?
I think you can do it yourself. I believe so.
Well, you can
think there's only
reach out.
yes,
All you
yeah.
have to do is
I don't think.